If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to the Lucid Programming channel for more programming tutorials. In this video, we're going to be going over a very quick overview of both the Beautiful Soup module in Python as well as the requests module in Python as well. So if you're not familiar, a very brief introduction to both of those. Requests is going to be a module that's going to allow us to access various resources on the web. So allow us to obtain information from various websites, navigate to those websites, and Beautiful Soup is going to allow us to parse that information. So once we navigate to those websites, we might want to extract certain types of content from those websites, and Beautiful Soup is going to allow us to do that. So this is going to be a very much from the ground up video. The only thing I assume that you have installed on your machine is Python and pip for installing Python packages. If you have both of those things installed in your machine, you should be ready to follow along one-to-one, and it should work out just fine. So we're going to go over some of the basics of both the requests and Beautiful Soup module in the first part of this video, and then we're going to bring all of those things that we learned into a very real project, or a very simple project, I should say. This is really meant to be a very minimal introduction to both of these modules and just to see an example of how you can be effective with both of these things. So let's just get started by installing both the requests and Beautiful Soup modules on your machine. You probably will already have requests installed, but we'll just make sure that you have that installed in any case. So go ahead and open up a terminal, or if you're on Windows, command prompt, and go ahead and type in the following two lines. So pip install requests. If you already have this installed on your machine like I do, you'll see some requirement already satisfied messages pop up here. That's totally fine. If you don't, it will install on your machine. You probably should have this installed already. The other one is install Beautiful Soup 4. So go ahead and say pip install BS4, and I already have this installed on my machine, so we're good to go. Alright, so we've got all the things that we need installed. I'm just going to go ahead and close that window, and we're going to move back to our file here. So we've gone ahead and done this part. We've installed both of these modules. So what we're going to do next is we're going to import them and use them. So we're going to import requests, and then we're going to import a specific class from the BS4 module that we installed, specifically the Beautiful Soup class. So this is going to allow us to, in the terms of Beautiful Soup, soupify content that we obtain from a website, and again, that will make it parsable so we can extract information from that content. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the request module, and I guess before I go any further, I want to mention that all of the code along with the comments that is kind of supplementing what I'm saying here, all of that is going to be provided on my GitHub, and the link to that will be accessible in the description, so you can go ahead and download that if you want some additional information as to what I'm doing or saying. Right, so back to this, we're going to create a variable called result, and we're going to say request.get, and then we're going to pass in the website that we want to access. So in this case, I'm just accessing the homepage of Google, so I'm just going to move my browser over here. So I'm just going to access this page right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that, and then what we're going to do to make sure that the page was actually accessed is we're going to print out the status code, which is just an HTTP status code letting us know whether or not the page was accessible or not. So 404 errors are an HTTP code that's letting you know that the content that you're looking for is not present. A 200 code is letting you know that the content that you're looking for is present and the response is okay. So I'm going to go ahead and write this. I'm going to run it. So I'm going to say Python. This file is called Beautiful Soup and request.py. If I run this, it's going to run it. Let me just clear the terminal because it's kind of messy. Let me run that again. And we see that the code that we get back from the google.com homepage is 200, which indicates that indeed the page is accessible. So another thing that we can do is we can also print out some other information of the web page that we just accessed, like the HTTP headers. And again, for more information on both the headers and the status codes, you can navigate to these links that are in the comments that point to the Wikipedia articles on both of those topics. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this, and we'll see what the headers look like. So there's just some extra information on the google.com homepage. So for instance, we can see here the domain is google.com. There's some other information here as well that might be of use. Just going to go ahead and close that. It's more or less just to verify that not only is the page valid, but it's also indeed the page that we wanted to obtain. Let's keep moving down here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to extract the content of the page, and that is actually the source of the page, and we're going to store that in a variable. So the object that we created here, this result, the result has these built-in methods, status code, headers. That's how we were able to print out both of those types of information that we just printed out there. Another one that it has is .content, and that is going to return the source of that page. And then what we're going to do is store that into a variable called src for source, and then we're going to have this variable. So let's go ahead and run that, and I'm just going to print out the source so you can actually see what it looks like. I'm going to run that like this. So we see a bunch of output here, and this is really just the web source of the google.com homepage. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Now that's kind of a lot of stuff all just thrown on the screen. That's great that we can actually access it. Now we turn to Beautiful Soup because this is going to allow us to actually do something with that content. So what we're going to do now that we've obtained that content, we've navigated to that web page, we've verified that we're on the actual web page that we want, and now what we're going to do is we're going to pass that source variable into this Beautiful Soup class, creating a soup object. And this really is just kind of an object that Beautiful Soup creates from this source, and it allows us to extract certain types of information that we might want to extract from this thing. So we're going to store the result of that object in this variable called soup. So I'm passing in source here, and there's an extra parameter here, this LXML. You can more or less just ignore this extra parameter. It doesn't really mean too much. If you don't have it in there, you'll get a warning, essentially to tell you to put it in there. So it's there for all intents and purposes, but you don't necessarily need to worry so much about why this is here. So we have the soup object. So for instance, one thing that we can do now that we have the soup object is we can do things like give me all of the links on the page. So what we can do is we can create a variable which I can call links, and I can say soup.findAll. So findAll is a method provided from this Beautiful Soup object that we're accessing here. And what do I want to find all of on this page? I want to find all of the A tags. So this A is the argument that's being passed in. It tells Beautiful Soup to say, hey, find all of the A tags or all of the links on this page, and then store them in this variable links, and then we're going to go ahead and actually just print those out to the screen. And just so we don't get like too much content, I'm going to go ahead and comment out the previous print statements here just so we don't have too much output on the screen. So we've got our links, we'll print them out, and then we'll print a new line. So I'll write that, give it a run, and let's see what we get. So this is the output that we just ran here, and we can see that we have a list. So you can see the square bracket here, and the end square bracket indicates a Python list. And the contents of this list are all of the A tags on the page. So if I move, let's just take a look at some of these links. So we have images, we have one that has the text maps. So let me just kind of move this back over here. Indeed, if we look, let's just look at over here, we have this thing called images that is pointing to the link in the top right, maps, etc. So we can look for other links in this list that will correspond to the actual links on the page that we have searched for all the links on the page. So that's that. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out so we don't have excess output here. And let's just keep going down. So getting all of the list of links is one thing, but we might want to actually extract certain types of links. So maybe the page that we're requesting, the page that we've just soupified, it has links that we're actually after. So this example here says, okay, actually I care about all of the links that have a certain string in the text field. So what do I mean by the text field? If I bring this back up, I essentially want to look for all of the links, let's say, that have the word about in them. So I want to see all of the links that have the word about. So anything that's an A tag where we, between the A and the /A, there's the word about. If it has that, I want that link. So that's one example, one use case out of many that you could form in this type of workspace. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop through all of the links that we've obtained from above. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say if the word about is in the text of the link. So again, what I'm doing is I'm using the .text part of that variable. So as I'm looping through each of these links in that list, every one of those elements in that list is actually a Beautiful Soup element. So that allows me to call this .text function on each of those elements, because that is defined from this element that is extracted and stored in this list. So I'm saying, look at the text in that link in that list, and is the word about in that text? If so, then go ahead and print out that link, because I care about that link, and actually go ahead and print out the actual thing that it goes to as well. So that's what this is doing here. So link also has a attribute, or I should say a function, attrs, and I'm looking for a specific attribute of that link. So inside the A tag, there's an attribute inside of that, which is the href tag inside of that, and I'm saying give me the content of that href inside of the link tag, which is the inside of this tag that has the A. So there's kind of a lot of Russian doll kind of structure going on there. So let's go ahead and just print that out. I'll write that, run it. So what we have here is we have the link. So we found the about Google thing right here, so that's good. And then we also have the href attribute of this link. So for instance, we see this is the whole A tag. So we have everything from the start of the A tag to the end of it, including the text, including the href. And then what we did with the next line is we said, hey, inside of the A tag, there's this attribute called href, and we want to access the content of that attribute inside of the A tag. And what we did there, that's precisely this, and that's what we're printing out right here. So I hope that makes sense. I know that's kind of drilling down quite a bit, and you can go pretty complicated with these types of expressions, but I think once you understand this level, you can arbitrarily apply different levels of complexity to your own situations, your own problems, your own situations, your own scenarios. I said that already. Anyway, so we have this structure set up. We have kind of a general idea of how to use both requests and Beautiful Soup. Let's go ahead and try to apply this on a more elaborate web page. And the web page that I had in mind is this web page right here. So this is just a collection of briefings and statements given at the White House. So you can see the day of this upload is September 12th, and so these are the most recent remarks by briefings and statements that have something to do with the White House. So there's a whole list of them, and the goal of what we're going to do with Beautiful Soup and requests is we're going to navigate to this page. We're going to try to find a way to extract all of the links on this page, and specifically all of the links that have are sort of in this feed here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to store them into a list, and then you could think about doing whatever you like to that list. I mean, of course, like the possibilities are quite endless depending on your goals, but this just kind of gives you the scaffolding, the structure, the idea to take this and then, do whatever you want for your own purposes. So let me just minimize this for now. Let's go back to this code. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open up a new tab. So I'm going to go ahead and say tab new. I have another file that I've created and have some initial comments in, which I've called whitehouseexample.py. I'm going to go ahead and open that file here. So you can see that I've just opened a Python file, which is called whitehouseexample.py, and it just has some comments which kind of indicate what this is all about. So we want to obtain links from this website, as we just mentioned. We want to, this is just kind of telling you what this website is all about. And the goal, as I mentioned before, is to extract all of the links on that page and then just kind of print them out into a list. So we can pretty much use the majority of what we already have, and we can just kind of go from there and more or less just copy and paste some things that we have from our previous file. So let's start off by just doing the very basic things. Let's go ahead and import requests. Let's go ahead and say from BS4 import Beautiful Soup. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, let me just go back over to this tab over here because I think it's a little bit easier to just copy and paste some of these things. We're going to want to do a very similar thing where we use the request.get method, and we're going to paste in not google.com this time, but we're going to paste in the website of the statements. So we're going to go ahead and cut in there. I'm going to bring this website up. I'm going to copy this link here, put this back over there, and then I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in there. So this is now the website that we're accessing, these statements for the content that we want to extract. Okay, so we've got that. Now the next step is we want to, let's go back over here. So let's see, what else did we do? So one of the other things that we did is we stored the content, once we've navigated to that site, is we stored the content of that into a variable called src. So that's pretty much just a direct copy and paste. We can just move that right in there. So now we have an src variable that has the content from the result. And now what we want to do, going back over to the initial file that we have, I want to create a soup object. So I'm going to copy that, move that over there. That's also exactly the same. So I've gotten the source from the web page. I've created a soup object based on that source that will allow us to parse. And then let's go ahead and write some new code. So I'm going to create a list, which I'll call URLs. This will just be the list that will populate with the links that we care about. And then what I want to do is I want to loop through all of the links. So let's go back to the page here. So we have a couple links. These are the links right here on the page. Let's just go ahead and inspect them. So if you're on Chrome or Firefox, if you right click on an element on your page, there should be something like this where it says inspect or inspect element. If we go ahead and click that, we'll be taken to this sort of thing over here, which is showing us exactly what in the source of this page this element corresponds to. You can see as I move over this content, various things are being highlighted to indicate that these things correspond to the code that I'm sort of mousing over here. It's a very nice tool. So basically, one thing that we can kind of observe is that all of these links, if I right click on this one as well, all of these links are contained in these H2 heading class tags. So inside of the H2 tags, we have the A link, or the link that we're actually after. So you can see that all of the links on this page are in fact formatted in this way. So all of these things are in between H2 tags, and one thing that we can do, we didn't see this exactly, but one thing that we can do is we can tell Beautiful Soup, hey, find all of the H2 tags on a given page, and then we'll loop through those and then extract a link from those, and then we'll have our list that we're after. Minimize that. So we've got our empty list. So now let's do this. Let's say for H2 tag in soup.find underscore all. And then here, remember, if we go back to this initial file here, we wanted to find all the links. And what we did is we said find all of the things that had the A tag. Well, in this case, we don't want to find all the things with the A tag just yet. We want to find all the things with the H2 tag. So we'll go ahead and say find all of the ones in this soup that have the tag H2. And then inside of that, if you recall, if we go back to that page, inside of that H2 tag, there's an A tag, and that's what we want to extract. So we'll go ahead and minimize this and say, okay, now that we're looping through all the H2 tags, let's say A tag is equal to H2 tag dot find. And what do we want to find? We want to find the A tag inside of that. So there's find all and there's find. So find all is going to be a function that's going to return to us a list. It's going to return all of the ones on the page. There might be no items of this form on the page. There might be one, there might be many. In any case, it's going to return to us a list. This A tag is going to just find a single element. So it's just going to find a tag, the first tag that corresponds to this, and then we're going to store that in this variable A tag here. Now what we want to do, we have hypothetically our A tag, and we're going to add that to our URLs list that we have up here. So we're going to say urls.append, and then we're going to say A tag, and actually I don't want to just add the A tag, I actually want to do kind of similar to what we did over here, where I said not just the link, but I want the attribute of that link that corresponds to href. So going back to this thing here, we've looped through all of the H2 tags on the page. Inside of the loop, we have this thing that says, okay, inside that H2 tag, there should be an A tag. And actually, furthermore, I want the href attribute. I want the actual link that is inside of this href attribute. So let's go ahead and do something very similar. So let's say a tag dot attrs, and then we'll do href, just like we did before. Okay, so that is pretty much all we need there. And then just to make sure that we actually have a list that's populated properly, let's go ahead and print out URLs and see what we have. So we'll write this, I'll clear the terminal, and then we'll say Python, and the file is called the White House example py. If we do that, it'll run there, it'll grab them. We can see that we have this now, this list of all of these links that correspond to each one of the elements on this page. So we've successfully extracted the links for each of these briefings and statements. Pretty cool. And not very much code either. You can see this is quite concise. We're going to be going over how to create certain objects in Beautiful Soup, and we're going to be taking a look at how to make use of those objects to extract content from web resources that you might be interested in extracting the content from. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just import Beautiful Soup. So again, assuming that you have this installed, we're just going to say from BS4 import Beautiful Soup, which is the class that we're going to use to soupify the HTML content that we're going to eventually parse in this video. And the HTML content that we're going to parse in this video is actually just going to be described by this variable here, which is a string that really just contains a very, very simple HTML web page. So the reason that we're doing it like this is, for one, to keep things very simple. We just want to illustrate very basic concepts about how to kind of parse this type of content. The other thing is to keep it reproducible. We could see this example on an actual website that's on the internet somewhere. However, if the source code for that website is changed in any way, then the video may become incorrect as a result because the source changed, and therefore our source might not be doing the correct thing, and at the time, whenever you happen to be watching this, could be giving you a different result than what you actually expect. So this string is just going to describe a very simple HTML web page that we're going to use as our example. And just to give you a sense of what this looks like, we're going to go ahead and write this content to a file. So what I'm doing here is I'm just creating a file called index.html, and then I'm writing that content that we defined up above. So the HTML doc string, I'm just going to go ahead and write that out to a file. And then if we go ahead and run this, I'll go ahead and clear the terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and run this file, which is called Beautiful Soup Objects. We don't see any output because there's no output to be seen. But if we go to our directory in which the file lives, we can see that it did create this index.html web page. So we can go ahead and open this up in a browser. And if we do so, we see this is the HTML rendering of the string that we saved and wrote to file. So you can see there's some very simple content on this page. There's some stuff between some bold tags, stuff between some paragraph tags, links, things like that. So we're going to see how to make use of Beautiful Soup objects to extract content like this. And my hope is that you can see it applied in this very somewhat contrived and simple setting, and optimistically apply it to your own setting in which you want to apply these types of ideas. So I'm just going to close this, I'm going to minimize this, and we're going to go back to our code. So let's keep moving on down here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a soup object based on the HTML doc string variable that we defined up above. And so this is going to allow us to parse the HTML content. So one thing that I do want to mention that I don't believe I did mention in the quick start guide is one thing that's kind of neat is you can use this printify function, which is provided from the Beautiful Soup class, which allows you to output the HTML code in sort of a nicely formatted way. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this and give this a run. So if we give this a run, we see that the HTML code is printed out very nicely, it's indented properly, and it just kind of looks very clean and how you would expect it to be properly formatted, let's say if you were writing this code. So alternatively, if we get rid of this printify function, if we just kind of remove that there, write it, and then run it again, you can see that this output here that we got kind of scrunches everything together. So it really depends on what you're looking for, what you're trying to go for. If you're getting like a big sense of maybe a more complicated web page, it might be nice to look at this form here. Otherwise, if you kind of want to see everything scrunched on just this screen here, it might be fine to look at it like this. So it really depends on what you're going for, but it's nice to know that this type of function exists. So I'm just going to comment this out so we don't have a whole ton of output as we're moving along here in this file. And the next thing that we're going to cover here are tags. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this code, this HTML source, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to print out the bold tag. So if we do soup.b, this is going to give us the first occurrence of the bold tag in the HTML that we're parsing or from the soup. So if I go ahead and write this and give this a run, we see the output here is this content here. So it's the Dormouse story between these bold tags. So I just want to also point out that this content, this HTML content, is really just ripped straight from the Beautiful Soup documentation page with some minor alterations. So that bold tag that we just extracted is this one right here. It starts from the top of the file, it keeps moving down and finds the first thing that has bold tags, and it says, okay, I'm going to print this out. Alternatively, if we said soup not .b but .p, this would also do the same thing but with the p tag. So here we have class title, the Dormouse's story. Indeed, if we go up to the top of this HTML source, start from here, keep going down, it's the same thing here. This is the first occurrence of a p tag in the file. So that's what's going to be printed out there. So I'm just going to comment that out. And maybe we don't want to just print out the first occurrence, but maybe we also want to do something similar. So we're going to kind of build up to a way that we can find all of the tags of a given element. So another thing that we can do that's very similar to what we just did, instead of soup.b or soup.p, we could do a similar thing where we use the find function. So if we say soup.find and then give it the tag that we're looking for, this will give us, again, the first occurrence in the HTML documentation, in the HTML doc that has a bold tag. So if we go ahead and write this, and I'm just going to clear the terminal so we don't have too much output. we see that this is also the first occurrence of the bold tag that we got from before, where we just did soup.b. So just going to go ahead and go back here, comment that out. Now maybe what we want to do is we want to find all of the occurrences of the bold tag in the HTML document that we are parsing. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this, and the function that we're going to be making use of here is find_all. So this is a built-in function that we can use on a soup object that is going to find all of the content in this soup that pertains to this bold tag. So I'm going to go ahead and write this and run it, and we'll see that this returns a list where each of the elements in this list are beautiful soup objects that correspond to everything that contains a bold tag. So that's also good to know. So let's keep moving down in this file. So another thing that we can also think about is something called a name. So if we did soup.b.name, this is going to give us the name of the tag. So for instance, let's take a look at the first occurrence of the bold tag like we did before, and then we'll tag on a .name. So if we write this and give it a run, we see that the name of the tag is b. So that's essentially what this is going to give us. It's telling us the name of the tag that we've just printed out. Alternatively, we can alter the name and have that reflected in the source. So for instance, if we wanted to, for whatever reason, alter the name of this tag, we could do so in the following way. So we can define a variable tag, which is equal to soup.b. So this is the first occurrence of a bold item in the HTML document that we're parsing. We can print that out just to see what that is. So I'm going to comment this out so we don't get too much output. So we've created, just to refresh, we've created a variable called tag, which is equal to soup.b, the first bold occurrence in the HTML document. We're going to print that out. We're going to see what that corresponds to, which is something we've already seen before. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say tag.name, which is a property, just like we did, we printed that out here. So we're going to say tag.name, instead of being equal to bold or b, we're going to say actually set that name equal to block quote. So it's just some other thing. We could set it equal to whatever we want. I'm just using block quote as an example. And then what we can do is we can print out the resulting tag. So what we've done is we've found the tag, which is the first bold one, printed that out to verify what that was, and then we've actually altered, this is a mutable object, we're actually altering the bold content of this tag into a block quote, and if we go ahead and print that out, we'll see that this is no longer between B, but it's between block quote. You can see it starts and finishes with this tag block quote now. So I'm just going to comment that out there, and let's keep moving on. So let's go on to attributes. So let's go ahead and say that we want to define a given tag, just like kind of how we did before here, where we're finding the, in this case, the third element of the list that is returned for all of the bold objects that we're looking for in the HTML document. So if we go ahead and go back up to our source, remember that when, actually let me not even go up that high, but if we went back to this function here where we found all of the bold tags, remember that returned to us a list of all of the beautiful soup objects that corresponded to a bold tag in our HTML document. So what I'm essentially doing here is I'm saying find all of those elements and just give me the element index 2 of that list, and then let's just print that out just to see what we got. So we'll go ahead and do that. So in this case, it's a bold tag that has ID is equal to 1, and then in between that is this name test1, and then it's the end of the bold tag. So let's go ahead and work with this and see what we can do. So this specific tag, as we saw, has an attribute. So it's a bold tag, but it has an attribute inside of it, which is called ID. So we can actually access that attribute by saying tag and then using the array index notation. So it's overloaded that if we can access the ID field of this by saying tag open square bracket ID close square bracket, which is the name of the attribute that we want to access. If we go ahead and write that, we can see that the value of the ID field that we just accessed is equal to 1, and that's what's being printed out there. So it's kind of cool. So we can move right along and see sort of another example of this thing. Let me just comment these lines out so we don't get too much output. I'll go ahead and clear the terminal as well. So now let's go ahead and consider another tag for the sake of example. So I'm also creating another variable here, which I'm calling tag, and now I'm just going to print that out to see what we have. So this is the index 3 element of the list that is returned from all of the bold tags on our page. I'm just going to go ahead and write this and run it. So now this time we have another bold tag which has not just one attribute. So before we had one that was just one attribute, which was ID. Now we have some other attribute, which is called another attribute, which is also something else. So notice that this ID is pretty widely used in HTML. You'll see like a lot of different elements will have IDs equal to something, and this another attribute is not typically used. It could be anything else in the whole world. What we're going to see here is a way that we can extract not just one attribute, but also this attribute as well. So if we kind of move right along here, we can say print out tag ID, just like we did before, where we're printing out the attribute of the tag that we've defined up here that has the field ID. And then we can also do the same thing for another attribute, which is the name of the other attribute that we're trying to access. So if we write this and then run it, you'll notice that it was able to successfully do it for ID. So the ID was equal to very bold, that's printed out here. And then another attribute, we printed that out as well, and that's equal to 1. And just like how we had here, where this is mutable, we were able to alter the name. We can also do the same thing for these sorts of tags as well. We'll see that in a little bit. So let me just comment these lines out here. Let's create another tag variable. So I'll just set it equal to the same tag variable that we had before, just to verify that. Let's print that out. So this is the same tag. So I'm just setting a variable tag equal to that, and then I'm just printing that out. So if we wanted to see what are all of the other attributes that this tag actually has, so we knew because we looked at it, it had an attribute ID, it had another attribute called another attribute, but what if we didn't know what those were? What if we just wanted to see all of the attributes that this particular tag had? So Beautiful Soup provides to us something called this method here, attrs, which is going to allow us to see all of the attributes of a given tag. So if we go ahead, write this and print it out, we see that it returns a dictionary where the key is the name of the attribute, and then the value is the value of the attribute. So the key here, another attribute, this is equal to 1. That's the value of this entry in the dictionary. And likewise, this key here for ID, the value of this is equal to very bold. So that's kind of neat as well. So let me just go ahead and comment. I will keep that actually. I'll just get rid of these print statements. So as I mentioned before, these sorts of things are also mutable. So we can change the attributes, the values of the attributes, to some other value if we wish. So just to kind of refresh, we have this variable tag, which is equal to the element that we saw before. So let me just write that and run it. So this variable tag is equal to this Beautiful Soup object here. And what we can do is we can say, okay, let's access the element another attribute, and recall that that value was equal to 1. And what we're doing here is we're saying actually set that value equal to something else. So in this case, I'm just setting it equal to 2. So let's go ahead and print out the result of that mutable action. So we'll notice that the first time before we make any alterations, the attribute value is 1. However, once we change another attribute, once we change that value equal to 2, notice that it's reflected here. So we're able to actually change the values of those things, which is kind of neat. So I'm just going to go ahead and now comment this out, and I'll comment out these print statements as well. So let's keep moving on. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this tag that we had before and illustrate one further point about this tag. So another thing that we can do, since these things are mutable, is we can also eliminate or delete the fields of an attribute. So just like we do for a Python list, when we're trying to remove an element from a list, we can use the del keyword in Python to remove that element from the list. And this is what we're doing here. We're saying, okay, the tag that had those two attributes, ID and another attribute, actually just go ahead and remove ID. So let's go ahead and print out the tag before. So just to kind of give a sense of where we're starting from. We're starting from this thing here. And then what I did is I said del ID, and notice that after I did that and then printed out the resulting tag, there's no longer an ID field in this thing. So we can also do the same thing for the other field if we so wish, and then print out the result of that. And notice that we have, again, what we're starting with, this Beautiful Soup object with both of these fields, and then we've deleted both another attribute and ID from it, and we've printed out the result. So just kind of showcasing what you can do with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and comment all of those out now. And let's also comment out this tag as well. And let's keep moving on down and see what else we can do. So we're going to look at some strings. So we're going to define a variable tag, which is the same thing that we've been working with for the past couple examples. Just to kind of showcase that, I'm just going to print that out to the screen. So this is the tag variable that we're working with now, same thing that we've been working with again for the past couple examples. And then what we can do is Beautiful Soup also provides to us a .string method, and if we print that out, let's go ahead and see what we get. If we print that out, we get the content that's between the tags. So notice that this is what Beautiful Soup is considering as the string, the elements between the angled brackets, between the tags themselves. So this is the string content that we're printing out here, and that's what this is giving to us. So let's just keep moving down here. So I think we're pretty much at the end of the file. I'm just going to get rid of these two print statements. Another thing that we can do is, just like we saw before, the mutability of these things, we can also alter the string content in between these tags as well. So if I do something like tag.string and then replace with, so this is just a function that is going to allow us to replace the content that is that string with something else, and I'm replacing the content with this is another string. And then if we print out the result of that, we'll see what we get. So let me just kind of review what I'm doing here. Creating the variable tag that we've seen before. I'm printing out the original tag with no alterations whatsoever. Then I'm using this .replaceWith method to actually alter the text inside of that Beautiful Soup object, and I'm going to print out the resulting tag. So what we should see is the original tag with test2 in between, and then after we've replaced this content with this is another string, we'll see the same tag but with the text altered. So let me just go ahead and write that, and because we kind of have a lot of output on the screen, let me just clear it, and then let's go ahead and run this. So indeed, this is what we see. We see the initial attribute, or the initial Beautiful Soup object with test2 unaltered, and then we've replaced that with the method given to us by Beautiful Soup, and we've replaced it with this text here. This is another string. So that's just some of the attributes, or objects I should say, of Beautiful Soup, and some of the things that you might want to do when you're parsing a page. You might want to parse a page, make these changes, and then write these things to a file for various reasons. There's a lot of different things that you can do. I hope that this kind of showcases the things that you can do, and hopefully it's broadly applicable to sites that you may be encountering in your own scenarios. So if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to leave them below. I'll do my best to answer them. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.